In last week's episode of AirPower, I included a segment from my interview with retired Air Force General Bob Lorenzo Behler, who's not just a test pilot with hours logged in more than 65 different aircraft, he also flew the SR-71 Blackbird operationally before becoming the commander of the Air Force's Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance Center out of Langley, Virginia, and then becoming the director of the DoD's Office of Operational Testing and Evaluation. In other words, if we're talking about cutting-edge military tech that flies, General Behler knows all about it. And while the general had some great stories to tell, many of our eagle-eyed viewers could not help but notice the unusual-looking model in the background of General Behler's interview. And to be honest, I love that. This is why I genuinely feel as though I found my tribe in the AirPower audience, because you better believe that I asked the general about the very same thing.
Wow. But gentlemen, before I let you go, there's one question that I need to ask you in particular, General. You've got a U-2 and an SR-71 behind you, and a third aircraft that I can't tell what it is. Can you tell me what that third aircraft model is back there?
The Tornado?
Yes, yes, sir, that one.
No, I can't talk about it.
Very well. Very well.
It's an unmanned vehicle. It was built in my last job to be a fifth generation aerial target.
I've actually written about that.
So we have to have a low observable target so we can practice. That's what it is.
The general's discretion does make a great deal of sense. After all, the 5GAT, or Fifth Generation Aerial Target Program, has been publicly disclosed, but to date, there isn't a great deal of publicly available information about it. So I went ahead and found all that I could. Let's talk about this very unusual looking model aircraft on the general's desk and the very real aircraft it represents. The Fifth Generation Aerial Target Program is all about designing a target drone that can reliably emulate the stealth and capability set of adversary fifth generation fighters, like Russia's Su-57 or China's J-20. The idea is to produce a fairly capable but very low-cost drone that we could use to launch our own air-to-air missiles at and make sure they have what it takes to take down a stealthy adversary fighter. But it doesn't take an aeronautical engineer to recognize that there could obviously be much further-reaching implications than just a very fancy stealth target here. After all, if we could reliably produce a fairly low-cost drone that could mimic the performance and the stealth of, say, China's J-20, well, we've also got the beginning of a very capable UCAV on our hands. And that is not lost on the company producing these aerial targets. But we'll get back to that in a minute. The 5GAT concept dates back to 2006, when the Air Force first commissioned a study into what it would take to produce just such a stealthy target drone. And by 2017, the effort had been transferred to the Director of Operational Testing and Evaluation, just before General Behler took over. Now, by that time, California-based Sierra Technical Services had already been awarded a contract to produce their first flyable prototype. In 2018, the Air Force first revealed that the 5GAT's stealthy design was actually the result of a joint effort that included Air Force Academy cadets for the first time in history, working alongside their aerospace design instructors and some longtime industry insiders hailing from places like Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works. Those insiders were affectionately referred to as graybeards during the program, which I just can't help but love. Soon thereafter, the single 5GAT prototype built by Sierra Technical Services began taxi testing, completing a total of 24 low and high-speed taxi tests leading up to its maiden flight. According to these same DoD releases, the aircraft is about 40 feet long with a 24-foot wingspan and is listed as in the 12,000-pound class, making it just about the same size as a Northrop T-38 Talon supersonic jet trainer. In fact, it's even powered by the same J-85 engines. Now, these are afterburning turbo jet engines that can each produce around 2,900 pounds of thrust for a combined total of about 5,800 pounds of thrust. And as a result, you would expect that this aircraft could achieve supersonic speeds. After all, the very similarly sized and weighted T-38 can reach Mach 1.3, 2023. However, according to the aircraft's designers, it wasn't optimized for supersonic flight. Now, the aircraft does fall a bit short of the highest performing fifth-generation fighters when it comes to maneuverability, limited to around 7.5 Gs, which is comparable to the F-35C, but doesn't quite match the 9 Gs you can achieve in the F-35A and B, the F-22 Raptor, and likely the J-20. However, 9G maneuvers of that sort aren't particularly common in beyond visual range engagements, which is what this drone is designed to train for. But that maiden flight, which took place in 2020, ended in disaster. According to a DoD press release, the aircraft crashed near the end of its maiden flight. However, it wasn't all bad news. According to that same press release, the platform did complete all of its ground testing objectives, and the overall design and aircraft configuration were still considered sound. But because the only prototype from the program had been destroyed, the whole effort was put on the shelf. The program was then transferred to the Test and Resource Management Center, which is a subsidiary of the Office of Operational Testing and Evaluation, and it languished there until April of 2022, when the DOT&E decided to revive this effort and release a new solicitation for bids. Now, that bidding cycle ended only about 6 months ago, on August 4th of 2023, when the DOT&E awarded a $77 million contract to South Carolina-based Advanced Technology International Incorporated to restart the program. But interestingly, Sierra Technical Services was once again subcontracted to produce the actual drone. Now, in the past, the US military has used its own retired fighter jets as remote control aerial target drones, or FSATs, full-size aerial targets. And you can find lots of cool videos out there of QF-4s and QF-16s flying around without a pilot in the cockpit. But fifth-generation fighters are just too new to do that same thing, and that much was laid out in the press release for the contract award. I'll quote them here. Due to the increased cost and lifespan of the latest fifth-generation fighter aircraft, there are no retired airframes available that adequately represent the characteristics of fifth-generation threats. Key among these characteristics is size, signature, and electronic attack payloads. In other words, if the US wants effective practice targeting legitimate stealth aircraft, they need to build one to target. And that's where the 5GAT program sits today, in active development working toward fielding a low-cost drone that can reliably emulate the performance and stealth of adversary aircraft. But that's not the end of this story. As early as 2020, Sierra Technical Services was already proposing converting these stealth aerial targets into full-fledged stealth UCAVs, or unmanned combat aerial vehicles, and their timing couldn't be better. The US Air Force is just about to kick off their Collaborative Combat Aircraft, or CCA, development program, and this effort is all about fielding AI-enabled drones to fly alongside America's next-generation stealth fighters in development in the Air Force's Next Generation Air Dominance program and the Navy's FA-XX program, as well as the fact that Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall has already gone on record to say that the Block 4 F-35 that will emerge in the coming years will also fly alongside at least 2 CCA drones. Now, this all plays into the even broader Skyborg program, which aims to develop fully autonomous AI that can take their cues from the crewed pilot and the nearby fighter, as well as developing an AI-augmented autopilot of sorts that will take over the simpler tasks from the pilot and the crewed fighter to allow them to focus all their attention on managing the battle space. Now, the Air Force intends to award a contract for the Next Generation Air Dominance fighter this year, in 2024, with the goal of having them starting to enter service by the close of the decade. The Navy expects their FA-XX fighter to follow a bit further behind, likely by 2035. So to all of you who kept asking, what is that weird-looking aircraft model behind the General? I just wanted to say thanks, because while I had done some reading about this program in the past, it was fun to dive into it a bit deeper.